welcome to Pops and Drops Podcast.
Episode 1.
Episode 1. Why Pops and Drops, Chancellor?
Because you're old and I drop beats.
Okay, so...
You're not super old. You're just a pops.
Millennial and a boomer.
Barely a boomer.
By 7 days.
There's something different about you. I'm feeling different now that I found you. There's something different about you. Yeah, I'm feeling different now that I found you.
So the idea is that we will chat about important issues and get a boomer's perspective and a millennial's perspective.
Yep.
And we will probably argue at some point, as we often do. And hopefully, as we cover these topics, we can come to understand each other's perspective and perhaps make some headway in terms of finding some common ground. Hopefully, those who share the podcast with us, listening and watching, can use this to help them gain some perspective as well.
Sounds like a good goal.
Okay, so let's kick it off. Let's kick it off with an easy topic. How about racism?
Okay.
So, what's your definition of racism?
My definition of racism is viewing other people as beneath you based solely on the color of their skin.
Okay.
Believing that you are better than them or that they deserve less than you because of the color of their skin.
Okay. Well, that's not different than my definition of racism, really. I mean, treating someone differently, I don't even know that you necessarily need to believe anything about them, but if you treat them different based on the color of their skin.
If you don't afford to give them the same opportunities as everyone else, that's racist. If
you individually.
Society itself is pretty racist. I'm not saying, but society is built up of individuals.
Okay. So, how does society as a collective operate, or how do you assign agency to society?
What do you mean by that?
Well, if you have some kind of an organization that's just a collection of people, then how, if there's some characteristic or trait of that organization, how do you address that? It's like treating a corporation like a person.
It's ridiculous.
Right. Concur.
Yes.
So, if it's just a collection of people, then how do you say this organization is racist or this organization is virtuous or whatever? It's just the people in it, right?
Yes. But the policies that organization instills or puts out can be racist.
Well, so if it's codified and written down like a policy
it doesn't necessarily need to be written down. It can be if it's accepted within the organization. If it's accepted that police beat African Americans or black people, then if it's widely accepted, then that is racist.
Okay.
Because it is.
Right.
If there's 2 police officers who break into a black woman's house and kill her while she's sleeping.
Okay. I would say, obviously, that's horrible. I would say that it's difficult to call it necessarily racist if given the exact same circumstances with a white woman, they didn't break in and shoot her. I mean, see what I'm saying? It's racist if they only do it to a black woman.
They do only do that to a black woman. They do only do that. You don't hear hundreds of stories of cops murdering white people all over the place.
Or you don't hear them, but that statistically, that's what happens.
No, it isn't. Where are you?
No, I mean, if you look at the numbers, if you look at the numbers, the misbehavior of bad cops is not disproportionately levied on black people. You don't hear about the stories because the media chooses not to cover it. But then if you go and actually look at the crime statistics.
The crime statistics are based on the populace. So there is more white people in America. And so more white people break laws and are arrested. But if you look at the amount of the amount of black people versus the amount of black people that are arrested, that is much, much higher.
Well, yes, that's true.
And that's the statistics that we need to look at.
Well, so there's two different things. There's policing, meaning, how often people get stopped as a proportion of their population. And then there's the violence, which is as a proportion of the stops, how many people get beat or, shot or killed or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So there's two different proportions there. So I totally agree that cops spend more time in minority neighborhoods. They make more stops of black suspects and all that. So yes, there are disproportionately more stops of black people by police.
And it's not just the stops, it's how they treat them when they stop them.
Okay, that's a good point. So the assumption of the policeman when they make a stop of a black person is different than the assumption of that white.
Yes, big time.
Right. So I agree with that. In general, my perception, I don't know, maybe that's not even the case. Would that hold true for a black police officer as well as a white police officer?
I don't know. I'm not black. I don't know.
Okay. So that's a question, right? But then the issue is, if they have those assumptions about the people that they're stopping, we're assuming that they have a different opinion about a black suspect than a white suspect when they make a stop.
Yes.
The numbers suggest that as a proportion of stops, white people are more likely to get shot than black people.
That's just because there's more white people. That's the only reason.
No. So that's why I said there's two different proportions we're talking about. You say there's more white people. That's stops as a proportion of the population. I'm talking about violence as a proportion of the stops. See what I'm saying?
Yes, but those correlate. Those align with each other. Because white people are getting stopped more, there's going to be more violence for white people because there's more white people in general.
So you're talking about aggregate numbers. I'm talking about a ratio. I'm talking about a percentage. So if you have 1,000 white people in the population, and you make 100 stops against the white people, and 10 of the white people that they stop get shot, right? That's 10% of the stops.
Yes.
And the stops are 10% of the population. Okay.
And if you did the exact same thing with 1,000 black people and the 100 stops, there would probably be more stops than 100, but if there was 100 stops, then the proportion of people who get shot would be closer to like 40 or 50%.
And that's where you're wrong. That's not the statistic. That's what we're talking about. That's what you believe based on what you've read and the way the news media covers it. But in fact, if you look at the actual numbers, if it was 10% for whites, it would be 9% for blacks.
That just doesn't make any sense. That doesn't.
The reason that you think it's higher is because you're looking at the the proportion of the population, not the proportion of the stops. Because black people, we know black people do, as a proportion of their population, black people do get stopped more.
Yes.
Okay. The percentage of those stops that results in violence is lower than for white people.
But that's just because they get stopped more.
Okay. So
you're saying that the percentage is lower because they get stopped more. That's what you're saying.
I'm saying the percentage is lower and they get stopped more. So in the aggregate,
the reason why the percentage is lower is because they get stopped more.
So there's more stops of the people that just turn out to be nothing. Is that what you're saying? They're stopping black people with a lower threshold, a lower bar. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, they pull over more. They pull over more black people. Okay. And when they can't find a reason to arrest them,
they let them go.
And they let them go.
Okay.
But they also hunt for reasons. They don't hunt for reasons with white people. They hunt for reasons with black people.
Okay.
Because the police in general
don't bang the table.
Are racist.
Okay. This is our first episode, so we're learning our audio lessons. Don't bang the table.
And society as a whole. America was built on the backs of slaves. Separate but equal up until like the 60s. This is still a very racist country.
Okay, so let's take that apart, right? So when you say America was built on the backs of slaves,
yes.
How do you mean? Specifically, what do you mean by that?
It means they literally built the roads in the South, and they built those plantations that sustained the economy and allowed America to grow.
Well, America's growth was actually fueled by the industrialized northern states. Early, like in the colonial times, right, before the Revolution, we were an agricultural colony of Britain. Yeah. So before it was America, when it was still Britain, essentially.
Yes.
Okay, during that period of time in the South, crops like cotton and tobacco relied heavily on slavery. Yes.
Up until the 1860s, up until the Civil War, they still did, and even after the Civil War with sharecropping and all that bullshit.
Okay. There were white sharecroppers too, but
very, 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 very small percentage. That's like saying that there were a ton of Irish slaves here, which there weren't.
Well, they would have been called indentured servants, but
there's so little of them, and it didn't even.
No, I mean people made indentured servitude contracts to cover to cover the cost of their transportation to the United States. If you were poor and Irish, and you couldn't afford a ticket on a boat,
or if you were drunk and Irish and you got wasted and then you woke up on a ship, which is the stories that they taught us when I was in middle school and high school. So that the Irish people that were sent over here were ones that got wasted and then woke up on ships in chains.
That sounds a little bit racist. So you went to a school that preached racism against Irish people?
I went to a school in the South.
Well, but
they also praised Columbus.
But your textbooks and your curricula were developed to meet federal education standards of the public schools, right?
Yes, I assume.
So just because the school was in Virginia doesn't necessarily mean that particular story about drunk Irishmen was only told in... I think it sounds like you're a little bit racist against people from the South.
You can't be racist against people from the South. You can't.
Well, we'll go back to your original definition of racism.
Yes.
Which was treating people differently, or believing. You said believing, I said treating. So
based on the color of their skin. I said based on the color of their skin.
Okay.
People in the South, that's not based on the color of their skin.
So what is it if it's I mean, there's a lot of African Americans in the South.
Yes, but not
Very high proportion of the elementary and middle school teachers in the South are African American.
I didn't have a single. I didn't.
Well, you
I
didn't
didn't
grow
have a
up in
single
the
one.
South, Chancellor. You grew up in suburban Richmond, Virginia.
Richmond was the capital of the Confederacy.
Yeah, that is true, but
And
you
people
were
at my school wore Dixie Outfitters T-shirts and drove John Deere tractors.
okay.
You can't say we didn't grow that we weren't in the South. We were in the South because if someone wore a Dixie Outfitters T-shirt in New York City, their ass would get beat. But the kids in my high school would wear Dixie Outfitters on top of Abercrombie polos and pop their collars.
That's just a very sad story, Chancellor. That's a sad fashion story.
That's what it was, man.
But you shouldn't leave the impression with people that you grew up in, rural Mississippi or something.
I didn't, but there was maybe 2 black people in my high school. And there was like 1 Asian person in my high school, and everybody else was white.
Okay. So, have you been throughout this? Because that does not reflect most of the South. That's the suburb.
It reflects the South for white upper middle class.
Right.
And that it would probably be the proportions would be the same if we were in Georgia or in North Carolina or in South Carolina. If we lived in the exact same kind of neighborhood.
Okay, you could find upper middle class pockets of suburbia around any city, anywhere in the country. Yes. But keep in mind, just to be specific about your language, when you say the South, you're making a generalization from your experience in a upper middle class suburb of a city that happened to be in the South.
Yeah, it was still in the South. It was the capital of the Confederacy.
Yeah, but do you understand what I'm saying about making a generalization? The South typically is, when people generalize about the South, particularly in relation to race and social society.
Charlottesville, where that shit happened, was not that far away from where we live. It was like a couple hours away.
Yes, that was Virginia.
That's the South. Charlottesville is the South, man. That's where they feel embodied. They feel like they could go and carry tiki torches and raise their Nazi flags and their Confederate flags and feel okay about it. We were right there. That's the South.
Okay. That's true. That's where that happened. I don't know if that's where most of those people came from, but
UVA, isn't that where Charlottesville is? Charlottesville is UVA. Where
Monticello is.
Where half of my high school went to college. Like we were in the South, man. Just because we were a couple hours away from DC too did not mean that we weren't in the South.
Okay. Well, but I'm just saying, you're painting a picture from your experience in Virginia and applying it to Jacksonville, Florida, Biloxi, Mississippi, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, Mobile, Alabama. Life in those places is different.
Yes.
Okay, I just want everybody to understand.
But it's not.
When you're making a how do you know it's not that much different? Have you been to those? I've been to those places.
Okay.
That's one thing about being an old boomer. You get around a little bit.
Okay.
So I'm just saying, you to avoid getting into arguments with someone from Biloxi, you're saying the South and making a generalization that in many cases won't apply because you're calling it the South based on your suburban Richmond experience. It's not necessarily the same.
Okay.
Orlando, Florida is in the South. You've been to Orlando.
Yeah, and Orlando is very, very, very southern. If you aren't around Disney World, I sold property management software to people all around Orlando, and there are many, many Southerners who talk like this and still don't know what they're doing. Like it's not. It is the South. So if it's not racism,
belittling people based on their accents and
It's not belittle.
treating them differently or treating them as beneath you because of where they come from instead of what color of their skin. What's that if not racist?
I'm not belittling them because of where they come from. I'm belittling them because of their viewpoint, their viewpoints on the world and society. Not everybody in the South is racist. I'm not saying that at all.
Okay, it sounds like you are, but okay.
The majority, there is a big majority of people who live in the South who are racist, and that's where I think the seed of racism in America is. That's where I think, but also it doesn't necessarily even need to be in the South. The South, it's just rural, probably communities all around the United States. There are racists in rural communities for some reason. I don't understand it. Like even here.
Okay.
There are people who think that they can rock Confederate flags and Trump flags and think that that's okay, even though we're in the Pacific Northwest. Like, there are racist people everywhere.
Well, you know that and I don't know if this is still the case, but just to further your point, I think the headquarters at some point of the white Aryan nation was Coeur d'Alene, Idaho.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that's in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho is probably a bumblefuck town too.
Well, it's not. It's beautiful. And, no offense to Coeur d'Alene. If the white Aryan nation's gone and long gone, our apologies. but yes. But I think it's interesting that you perceive that there is this huge population. Like you said, a majority of the people in the South are racist.
Yes.
Okay. That's certainly not based on personal experience, because you said you hadn't been to most of those places. So you're drawing that conclusion based on what?
I mean, I've been there. I've driven through there. It's not like I haven't completely been there. I just don't remember because I was little.
Do you understand my point? Like if you had interacted enough with 100 people from Mobile, Alabama to draw the conclusion, then 60 of the 100.
Didn't they fly the Confederate flag in Alabama at the state capitol for a really long time? Aren't there Confederate statues all over the South of generals that should be taken down? Like, that's where I'm drawing my conclusions from. I'm drawing my conclusions from people who have Confederate flags, bumper stickers on their car, and wave that shit, and they voted Trump in. Like, all of those things add up to my opinion. Not just what I've perceived from what you think I perceive from the news media, which I don't even watch. My assumption is it comes from years of seeing that shit.
Okay. So
I guarantee you that Dixie Outfitters and there are more Dixie Outfitters than Confederate flags sold in North Carolina, South Carolina, Alabama, Georgia, Florida, Louisiana, Virginia than in the rest of the country. I guarantee you more of that crap is sold there than anywhere else.
That's probably true.
Then that's where I'm drawing my conclusions from.
So you're just saying the Confederate flag.
Confederate flag is incredibly, it is a symbol of hate. It is the exact same as the Nazi flag.
Okay. So if you hold that perspective and that opinion, then if that by itself means to you racist, then it's possible that a majority, in your opinion of what racist is, of the people in the South would be considered that. I mean, the Confederate flag is prevalent. I don't know if a majority of people fly the Confederate flag in the South, but a fair number of people do.
More people fly it there than anywhere else.
Well, that's true, because almost nobody flies it anywhere else. I mean, 1 is more than 0. That's still not a majority.
Yeah, but, I mean, people fly it here.
Yeah, but a very, very, very small number of people.
That one person is too many.
Okay. Well, you're applying your interpretation of that symbol to other people. Like, there's a lot of people who believe that symbol is about, and for a long time, I think a majority of the people who were flying it as a symbol of federalism versus democracy on mob rule anarchy. So when I say federalism, I mean that power should rest with the states versus the federal government.
I highly doubt any people who fly that flag have the intellectual capacity to believe that.
Well, again, now you're basically demonstrating that you have this opinion of people from the South or people that fly this flag.
Yes, I believe that they are ignorant and racist.
So if that's, I'm just wondering if you have a word for that, for treating someone as ignorant and beneath you.
I don't think that they're beneath me. I just think that they're ignorant and racist. That doesn't mean that they're not a human being. They're just ignorant and racist. They need an education. And they need to be locked in a room with 20 people, all from different. They need to be locked in a room with a gay person, with a trans person, with an Asian person, with a black person, with a Hispanic person. They need to be forced to interact with those kind of people if they want to grow.
Okay.
And they need to understand that those people are also human beings. And they need to understand that,
that
waving the American flag is the exact same as waving the Nazi flag.
Waving the American flag?
Waving the Confederate flag is the same as wearing... right now with Trump as president, it wouldn't be that far of a stretch. But waving the Nazi flag...
Okay. So, I'm getting a good flavor for the millennial outlook based on your conversation. Where does it go? I mean, it sounds like you've got some loathing, right? You're dealing with some loathing, yeah. Loathing of Trump, loathing of the people who elected him, loathing of a country who would elect someone like that or something,
Loathing implies deep-seated hatred.
Okay.
And I loathe Trump. I will say that. I do loathe Trump, and I loathe the policies and the fact that he has emblazoned and encouraged people to be racist. And I think that he's just a walking ego. But I don't loathe people who were raised within the confines of a system where all they were taught was racist ideology. So I can't. It would be like me disliking an 8-year-old because the 8-year-old's parents told them all this racist shit nonstop. I could not hate that 8-year-old because the 8-year-old just hasn't been informed.
Okay.
Now, the 8-year-old's parents, who constantly spew that crap at him, that's a different story.
Well, aren't they just grown-up 8-year-olds from their parents? Like, where's the cutoff?
To a certain degree, which is why I said I just would want them to be locked into a room or like put into a survival situation where they have to rely on other people that are different from them.
Okay.
And grow to love other people. I mean, I don't know how to fix systemic racism other than education.
Well, I mean, a lot of the current discussion around how we got where we are now is about the grievance studies' takeover of the education system. I mean, critical race theory and all that kind of stuff is essentially what many of the people who spend most of their days thinking about this stuff have said, that's what broke the system. That this idea of everything being based on race is how we got where we are now, with people trying to burn down buildings in the streets and shutting down Evergreen State College. And, you know that story, right? The Evergreen State College story. Oh, well, that's interesting. It's interesting that it really is interesting that you don't know that story. So I will give you a quick recap. Most people listening to the podcast or watching us on YouTube probably do know the story because it's made a few celebrities like Brett Weinstein. Uh, your cousin Charlie, I think, went to Evergreen for one semester. Anyway, Olympia, Washington, not that far from here. Evergreen State College, a unique school with a unique teaching model where the um, the students would spend an entire semester with one faculty member. So instead of taking 13 credits and spreading it out across 4 or 5 different classes and doing that for 2 or 3 years, they would spend all of their time with one faculty member on one topic. So 3, 6 months, whatever it was, just studying one thing with one faculty or a pair of faculty members. That was their unique selling proposition for the school, was that you could really focus in on a particular topic and become an expert, if you will. And then the teachers would take responsibility for the full curriculum, and they would be, there was less, in theory, there was less administrative bureaucracy and less interference from other faculty members. Brett Weinstein was a professor of evolutionary biology at Evergreen and a ardent civil rights proponent. He actually, let me see if I get the story correct, he left UPenn, I think, University of Pennsylvania, over the way that a black woman, student, I think, had been treated. Like the way that the university dealt with her issue disgusted him so much that he actually left the institution. And he won some award from, who was it? The National Organization for Women's Action or ACLU, or somebody actually recognized his anti-racism, his actual. The other thing he's famous for is discovering something about laboratory mice that suggests a lot of the cancer medications that we're being prescribed are ineffective because of the way that laboratory mice are bred and tested, that there's the way that these mice, because they come from a closed loop system, the telomeres in their cells are not representative of a random sample of mice. They all have a very specific profile, and so when drugs are tested on them, they come out with spurious results because of this biological evolution of this particular population of mice that are used in labs across the country. So anyway, that's Brett Weinstein, and very intelligent. Lives in Portland, as a matter of fact. So Brett was a professor at Evergreen and a very smart person and knew about the evolution of species and systems. And when the Equity Council or Equity Committee or whatever at Evergreen was instilled and started coming up with all of these programs, these diversity, equity, and inclusion, or as I like to say, diversity, inclusion, and equity, because the acronym is more appropriate, then he basically said this is essentially reverse racism. He said it's not about encouraging diversity. This is basically if you just swap the word white and black in your diversity program, you have a racist doctrine. It's reverse racism. And so he was labeled a racist, even though he clearly is not. He was labeled a racist, and they essentially, the students in this wild mob mentality, drove him out of the school. and the
Because
public,
okay, keep going.
the pub, and this was publicized. The work of Benjamin Boyce. You can YouTube or podcast listeners check out Benjamin Boyce. Does a great job of documenting this. Also, Mike Nana is doing a documentary on the whole thing. I encourage anybody to watch those. Look up Mike Nana. So that'll give you a picture of grievance studies and what's happened to the university system. Also, Jonathan Haidt from the University of Chicago talks about the coddling of the American mind and the way that the way that boomer parents raised their millennials has led to this situation, because they were essentially helicopter parents and didn't let millennials go out and discover and encounter boundaries and fail, because everybody was so protective. James Lindsay, Peter Boghossian, Portland State University, and Ellen Pluckrose are essentially the authorities on what's going on with grievance studies and these particular non-scientific areas of academia, if you will. But anyway, all of that's going on, and it's interesting that it's a pretty well covered territory in online debate, and so it is interesting that that's not something that you've come across.
Because reverse racism is not a thing.
So explain yourself.
You cannot be racist against the oppressors.
Okay, so you are adding something to your original definition. Your original definition was believing somebody was less because of their color of their skin.
Yes.
So now what have you added to that?
I haven't added anything to that.
Well, you just said you can't be racist against white people.
You can't.
Well, if you're black and you believe a white person is less than you because of the color of their skin, then that meets your definition of racism.
Racism, I think, I'm not stating that black people can't be racist against Hispanics, or Hispanics can't be racist against black people. But black people and Hispanics and Asian people cannot be racist against white people, because white people have been the oppressors for 500 years. We are the oppressors.
So
that's like saying, let's go way back in time to Moses and the Jews in Egypt. The Jews in Egypt could not be racist against the Egyptians, because the Jews in Egypt were the slaves. They were the ones who were getting oppressed. It is not you can harbor disdain in your heart for people who are pushing you down. But you should not harbor disdain in your heart if you are the person pushing other people down. And that's what racism is.
So again, you're going from the individual to the group. So you're saying an individual black person as they relate to the entirety of white people.
What about it?
Well, so that means you're racist because you're a white person.
How? If I acted racist?
No. If you say it's the person who's oppressed versus the group or population, like you just said, the Jews in Egypt and the Egyptians. So no matter what, like Moses was raised as an Egyptian. Okay. So Moses was racist against the Jews.
until he freed them.
Okay. So you're racist against the blacks because you haven't freed them yet? Is that what you're saying?
I have marched. I have shared. I have tried everything in my power to get education out there so that people understand what is going on. I'm sure when I was little.
Based on the logic of your definition, I'm saying based on the logic of your definition.
Yes.
That it's the individual who's being oppressed versus the entire population of the race or group that is systematically oppressing them.
Uh-huh.
Okay. You're in that group.
Yes, I'm aware of that.
So you're a racist. Based on your definition. That's my point. It's silly.
No, it's not. No, it's not.
You're not a racist.
I know I'm not.
Okay, then quit calling yourself one.
But I'm white.
Yes.
And so inherently, I was born with advantages that black people and Hispanics and Asians were not born with.
Oh, really?
Inherently.
So you were born with the advantages that Michael Jordan's kids don't have?
If Michael Jordan's kids and me walked into a job interview or walked and we both had the exact same resume and we had the exact same everything.
How does that have to do with how you were raised? You just said how you were raised.
I was saying I was born with inherent advantages. And my inherent advantage is the color of my skin.
Well, Michael Jordan's kids were born with inherent advantages.
Yes. Yes. But if a cop pulled over Michael Jordan's kid and a cop pulled over me, I would more likely be let go.
Not true.
Yes.
Not true.
Yes. And that is what
absolutely not true.
And that is what you don't understand. If the cop didn't know that he was Michael Jordan's
how would he not know when he handed him his driver's license and said, "Hey, I'm Michael Jordan's kid"?
Okay, if I was pulled over and a random black person was pulled over, I would more likely be let go.
That's probably true.
Yes, and that is what I'm talking about. And that is the problem with our society. And it would be the same in a job interview. If me and literally an exact carbon copy of me, but who was black, walked into a job interview, I would be more likely to get the job because of my skin. And that is what is the matter with America. And that is what's the matter, not just in America, but in the world in general. It's not just here. This shit happens in England. It happened in South Africa with apartheid and all of that crap.
It happens everywhere.
It happens everywhere, and it needs to stop.
Okay.
And it won't stop until...
But that's human. That's human. So what you're describing is inherent in human nature and not necessarily have anything to do with white Americans. You're talking about Hutus and Tutsis in Rwanda. You're talking about different tribes in Africa. You're talking about in Burmese in Myanmar. You're talking about, the way that people have, what's it called? They have in-group bias.
Yeah.
Right? So people feel more comfortable with people they think are like themselves. It has nothing to do with race. That's just human nature.
I would feel... I don't necessarily believe that that's human nature. I believe that it's shaped by...
It's shaped by millions of years of evolution.
No, it's shaped by society.
Well, yeah, if you define society as that point at which Homo sapiens started to clump together for the purposes of survival.
It's instilled. It's in everything. It's Uncle Ben and Aunt Jemima. It's all of that shit. It's constantly being spewed at us. The fact that people the fact that the Confederate flag is still a thing and hasn't been completely wiped off the planet. And same with the Nazi flag. The fact that those symbols are still out there is a reflection on how much further we need to go as a species.
Sure. I agree with that. If you look at a bell curve, right? You know what a bell curve is? Yeah. Okay. On the tails of a bell curve, there's always going to be the wackadoodles. This is always going to be there. I mean, there's almost nothing you can do short of some kind of genocide program to get rid of the tails of the distribution. So, yes, there's always going to be work to do, but it's a misconception to say that the activities of this tail of, like, that's like saying that the Antifa idiots in downtown Portland that have been burning shit down for 80 nights in a row is representative of the entire Democratic Party.
The reason why they are burning shit down is because of the systemic racism that is frequent in this country, and the fact that Trump is our president, and the fact that he's constantly spewing racist rhetoric. That is why they keep burning shit down. And it's because the talking has not done anything. It's because black people are still getting pulled over and killed and shot for no fucking reason. That is why.
Okay. And your belief and your vigor about that will be part of the discussion for episode 2, because we're going to talk about media sources and where these stories come from and how mainstream media is manipulating the story. Did you see the shooting in Kenosha today?
No.
Okay. So it's interesting, and this will be a preview of maybe of, more of next week's discussion, as we're coming up on almost an hour. Actually, we're not. We got more time. And this has to do with racism as well. All right. So this morning I wake up and your mother says, "Did you hear that a policeman in Wisconsin shot a black man in the back 7 times with his kids in the car, in front of his 3 kids?" That's what she said, in front of his 3 kids. I had not heard it. I was disturbed by that, so I went online and did some research into what actually happened. And the video was there of what actually happened. And what actually happened was, before I tell you that, let me give you a few more details of what your mom told me, because this is what she got from her sources.
Okay.
That a man had gone to a domestic dispute to try and break it up. So there was apparently 2 women fighting, and he went there to break up the fight, and the fight was broken up, but somebody had called 911, and he was leaving the house where this fight he had broken up was now over, and the police shot him in the back. Okay, that's the story I heard. When you go on the video, you see the police already holding their guns out at the guy, telling him to stop and get on the ground. And he defies the police and walks around his car and opens the door and reaches in to the car. Now, the guy, it turns out, had an outstanding warrant and had a prior conviction for assault against a police officer with a weapon.
Okay.
So if they called his plates in before they tried to stop him, that's what they understood. This is a guy who has an outstanding warrant and has assaulted police with a weapon in the past.
Okay.
Now he is refusing to stop and goes around and opens his door and lunges into the car like he's reaching for a gun. Then he gets shot. They've been yelling at him to stop, stop, stop. Even his neighbors were yelling at him, stop, stop. And he didn't.
What was in his car?
And he got shot.
He was reaching for? His wallet? For his ID? What was in the car?
I don't know.
That does
It wasn't. No, it doesn't.
Yes, it does.
The police have to assume the worst.
And they didn't have stun guns?
Apparently not.
And they couldn't have approached him without the weapons? They had to kill him?
They didn't kill him. They shot him 7 times and he lived.
Well, that's good.
Yes.
But what was in his car? And
Nothing
why didn't
was
they
in
use
his
a
car.
taser? And if they
know.
view him as a threat?
Yes,
why?
they viewed him because he had a prior for assaulting an officer with a weapon.
And how do you know that that was actually real? How do you know that he wasn't beating the crap out of before, and the cops just wrote down that he was?
I don't.
Assaulted them with a
I
weapon?
do not know. That
You
is
don't
possible.
know that. You don't know the whole story, and you also have a limited viewpoint. You also don't know.
Well, I saw the video at least. Your mom didn't even see the video.
Okay.
And the source that she used hadn't reported the fact that this guy he was a registered sex offender with an outstanding warrant and a record of assaulting an officer with a gun. And the point is that her source that told her that story left all of that information out, and her source that told her that story also sparked riots in Kenosha, where they started throwing bricks at police officer and burning police cars.
Okay.
I'm just saying, you're being manipulated.
I'm not being manipulated.
Well, your mom's being manipulated.
She may be being manipulated, but I'm not. And I do not.
So how do you make sure you're not being manipulated when you're getting information that you're then acting on?
The information that I'm getting is viewing Facebook Live videos of my friends that are in downtown Portland, who are looking at the police, and the police are shooting tear gas at them when they are peacefully protesting. That's the information. The mayor of Portland got gassed, dude. Cops do not give it. Cops do not care. They do not care. Every police officer is a bully who did not leave the small town or town that they grew up in. I don't think if you choose to be a police officer, you are choosing that profession. You are choosing to have power over people. It's a power grab. That's all cops want.
I don't know where you got that. It's a shame that that's the opinion that you have. And I
think it's the opinion I've had from every police officer I've ever interacted with in my entire life.
Probably because when you were interacting with them, you were acting like a douche.
No, I wasn't acting like a douche. And I've gotten out of shit more than I've gotten arrested. And the reason is because I'm white.
Maybe it's because you weren't doing anything. Did you ever get out of actual criminal activity because you're white?
I've gotten out of a couple of speeding tickets.
Because you were white, or because you were respectful to the police officer?
Because I probably outsmarted them when we were conversing.
What do you mean? Explain yourself.
I mean, I probably turned on the charm. It's not that hard for me to do that.
So you were being charming to the police officer.
Yes.
Okay.
Because
How many unarmed black people have been shot because they were being charming to a police officer?
They shouldn't have to be. That's the point. They shouldn't have to be.
Why not? You said that's how you got out of your ticket.
Yes, because that is an inherent gift that I was born with.
Oh, so now you're sure you're not racist, because now you're saying black people aren't born
charming? I'm not saying that. I'm sure there's millions of black people who are very charming.
Okay.
I'm not saying that.
What are you saying?
I'm saying that they aren't given the ability. They aren't, even if they are charming, the fear that is the fear that is rushed into the fear that they feel when they get pulled over probably does not allow them to be charming because of the system. Because the system taught them, if a cop pulls you over, there's a 50-50 chance that you're going to die. Because that's what happens.
Okay. That it's certainly possible that they have that fear, but it is not a 50-50. If you seriously believe that it's a 50-50 shot that you are going to be killed by a cop when you get pulled over if you're black, then you got some studying to do.
No, I don't believe that. I'm not saying that I believe that. I'm saying that in that moment when they are pulled over, they probably believe that because that's probably what they feel.
No, I mean, sure, that's what they
I mean,
feel.
that's what
But it's what I'm
I
saying.
mean, I don't feel like I'm going to die if a cop pulls me over, but I feel like, oh my God, I have to do everything in my power to make sure that that this dude doesn't completely ruin my life. Everything in my power, and I will say whatever I need to say to make sure that that cop leaves me the fuck alone. I'm so fearful of every time I see a cop, I get a shot of fear. It's like someone shoots fear right into my brain. And so I can't even imagine what it would be like to be black on top of that.
Wonder where did that come from?
Where did what come from?
This idea that you need to be afraid of police.
Have you ever interacted with every police officer I've ever interacted with? Even when we were marching, I could see the cops that were surrounding the thing. You could see the hatred in their eyes. You could just see it. You can feel it coming off of them like heat. All they want to do is to harm people and to arrest people and to meet their ticket quota. That's their job. Their job is to hurt people and to put them in jail. That is their job. That is what the police's job is.
So who taught you that?
The world. What do you mean who taught me that? Every cop I've ever interacted with.
And
the fact that
what
when
is
I was
the count? But
when
I know that's not true.
When I was 19 years old,
Mm-hmm.
I was at a house party. Okay, that got busted by the police, and the cops filed us out one by one. Okay, and one of the police officers was actually was a white woman. I was 19 years old, and they patted us down for some reason as we were leaving, and she said, "Do you like that?" And I'm like, "What the hell?" As she was patting me down.
That's both inappropriate and hilarious.
Why is that hilarious?
Because
it's a power trip. They feel like they can do whatever they want. They can say whatever they want. They can beat whoever they want. They have.
She wasn't flirting with you?
She might have been, but I was scared shitless, and it wasn't okay.
No, it wasn't okay.
Even if she was good looking, which I don't remember if she was, but even if she was good looking, it still would not have been okay.
Correct. It would not have been okay.
It's
just like it's not okay when hot teachers seduce 16-year-old students.
No, it's not.
No. It is funny though.
No, it's not. That's rape. That's not okay. It's not funny. It doesn't. If it was a girl or a guy or a girl, it's still rape. It's still a minor. It's not funny.
Well, okay. When you were 16, did you have a crush on a teacher?
No. When I was like 11, I had a crush on a teacher. Not when I was 16.
Okay. So anyway, that's a topic for a whole nother episode.
It's a position. It's people in a position of power taking advantage, and that's what's not okay. Every cop carries a gun, and they have the ability to kill any person whenever they want.
That's not true. I mean,
they have the
physical ability, but they don't have the
yes,
legal authority.
And knowing that, having that power literally strapped to them 24/7 is what gives them these giant egos that allows them to do these things.
So are you generalizing that every cop has a giant ego because they wear a gun?
I'm saying that it does boost up their ego and boost up the fact that they feel like they can kill people. A cop could kill anybody whenever they want.
That's when you say can.
They can.
Because they're wearing a gun. Anybody that's wearing a gun has the physical ability to take someone's life. They don't have the legal authority to do that.
Yes, but cops get away with it.
They really don't.
A vast majority of cops. Then why are those cops still walking free?
I don't know the Breonna Taylor story.
Breonna Taylor was sleeping in her house.
Okay.
Cops broke into her house and shot her in bed.
Oh, is that the one where they thought they were in the wrong house?
Yes.
They were trying to yeah. I vaguely remember that. So yeah, that's obviously illegal. They should be in jail.
They're not.
Okay, are you sure they're not?
Yes, I'm sure they're not.
Okay. Well, is there a civil rights suit filed against the city and those police officers?
I don't think that there is, and that is why Oprah
That
has
doesn't
spent.
make any
That is why
sense.
Oprah has spent millions of dollars putting Breonna Taylor billboards everywhere. That is why these riots have been continuing. You need to understand why this keeps happening. It's not just when there's a million isolated incidents, they're not isolated incidents anymore.
Okay, and when you exaggerate from 8 to 1,000,000, then you get riots instead of a good discussion. Remember, we talked about the tails of the distribution. There are obviously bad cops out there.
There are more bad cops than there are good cops,
okay.
And that is where we differ. Is you believe that there are more good cops than bad cops, and I'm saying that inherently, if you want to be a cop, you're probably not a good person.
Well, that's a shame that you feel that way. The role of government, so if you study Rousseau and John Locke and Montesquieu, and Leviathan and Hobbes, Thomas Hobbes for that matter, but the role of government, the role of a just government is the monopolizing of violence so that the government maintains order based on laws rather than individuals maintaining order based on who's got the biggest gun and is most willing to use it. And the police are the instrument that the government uses to monopolize violence. That's their role. You don't have a well-ordered society when you got the mafia running around running the streets. Right? That's what police are for.
But that's not what they do. They're not properly trained. If every police officer daily had to take like an hour-long class on how
about the Constitution? Like if they understood the Constitution, like the mayor Lightfoot in Chicago saying that she positioned police officers around the front of her house and the police officers were telling people they couldn't be around there, they couldn't use their cell phones to film anything. They were denying people their First Amendment rights. Freedom of the press, freedom of assembly was being denied because the mayor of Chicago didn't want people around her house.
Okay.
So that was a police officer that was enforcing an unconstitutional order.
Okay.
And so, yes, training the police both to understand how to diffuse situations, but also to understand the Constitution so that when one of their mayors or their chiefs or anybody gives them an unconstitutional order, they know the Constitution well enough to say, no, I can't do that. That is against my oath to uphold the Constitution.
Okay, that I understand that, but that's probably that is second fiddle to them having anti-discrimination training.
Okay.
They need to be trained. They need to every single day. They need to do like an hour of anti-discrimination training before they go out on the street.
Okay. So if you're a cop and you go out and you get 20 calls a day.
And cops don't even show up to prevent crime. They show up afterwards and report and fill out reports. That's what they do.
Well,
that's like 90% of the time. They show up after the event has happened.
How are they going to show up before the event has happened?
What do you mean?
Well, you're saying like they aren't there to prevent the crime. How would they necessarily... Unless you had a police person standing every 3 foot on every sidewalk in America, how are they going to be somewhere before the crime happens?
They're not... Well, if a crime is occurring, then they need to be...
So you're saying more police, so they can be close enough...
No, I'm saying more people who can handle situations. Better trained people that can handle situations. Not necessarily police, and not people who carry guns. So more social workers, more medics.
Okay. The role...
More... I would even go as far as cameras. More cameras everywhere.
Okay, so you want the government spying on you all the time.
I would rather have the government spying on me all the time than black people getting beat and killed by cops all the time.
Okay. That's interesting. I hadn't really thought about that. That trade-off, I don't know. Would that necessarily be a trade-off? You think if there was cameras everywhere, I mean, the police have their body cams now. Has that stopped it?
No, it's only. I mean, it probably has in certain situations when cops pulled over people, and if they've thought for a second, oh crap, I'm being filmed right now. I know for a fact that a lot of cops have stopped because not only did they have their body cams, but the person that they are pulling over says, look, I'm recording your ass right now. So go ahead and do whatever you're going to do. And that has stopped a lot of cops. Because I've seen a ton of those videos too.
So, do you think you would have gotten out of your ticket if instead of being charming, you pulled out your cell phone and said, I'm filming you right now?
I probably would have gotten a ticket.
I think you probably would have.
Yep.
And if you had started off the interaction with that kind of belligerent attitude, they
And
probably would have looked to make sure that there wasn't anything else they could have cited you for.
Yes, because cops are inherently evil and they're bad people. And they want to harm people and they want to give them tickets and they want them to go to jail because they are incentivized by that. Cops have ticket quotas. They're incentivized by that. And that is another problem. They should not be incentivized by giving people tickets.
That's true.
They should not have ticket quotas.
Correct. I agree with that 100%. I think they should either enforce the law or they shouldn't. Like, if you put up a speed limit sign that's 35 miles an hour and they have a rule of thumb of not pulling anyone over that's going between 35 and 40, and the people in that community get used to the idea that the de facto law is 40, even though the de jure law is 35, that then towards the end of the month, when they're nearing their quota, they start pulling people over who are going 37, then that's not a fair enforcement of the law.
Yeah.
Either be consistent and always give people tickets that are going 37 or don't.
And if we did not have highway patrol and if there was just cameras everywhere, then that would prevent that.
Well, it doesn't.
If everyone was getting tickets who speed all the time,
People would still speed.
no, they wouldn't. Not nearly as much. That would cut that way down. And same and
There are
exact same-
cameras all over Washington, D.C. There are cameras all over Washington, D.C. And they never stop clicking, and the tickets go out. You know, I mean, if you're worried about ticket quotas and using traffic violations to raise money for municipalities, the traffic cameras are the number one tool that municipalities use to raise money. Because, yes, everybody who goes, over the speed limit gets a ticket.
Okay,
But that doesn't mean fewer people go over the speed limit. It just means more people get tickets.
that's fine. That's
Okay.
still reducing the rate of people who are getting pulled over by the cops.
That is true.
And that's what we need to. That's what needs to stop.
Traffic stops, like police-related traffic stops.
Yes.
Well, to your point about being there before the crime is committed, it's often on traffic stops where they actually discover people that have outstanding warrants or have illegal guns and all that stuff. A lot of that happens in traffic stops.
Well, that would if there was a car. If you have like a stolen car, then that would still register, and then we could. And then when there's something like a stolen car, then we should send out like a fucking robot or something to go get that person.
I don't know. What do you mean? So, like, if somebody runs a red light and the cop pulls them over, runs the plates, and it's a stolen car, then instead of the cop going up to the window, they should send a robot up to the window?
I'm saying that if there is a camera that registers that there is a stolen car, then they should send out a high-speed robotic unit that can disable that car safely and arrest the person who's inside of it.
Okay, Skynet.
That's fine.
Okay.
That
You don't remember where that went, correct? You do remember the plot of the movie Terminator?
I would rather have robotic overlords than racist ones.
Okay. Okay, well, I think this was a very interesting discussion for our first episode. I look forward to reading the comments for sure.
If we get any.
Yeah, we shall see. So, I hope everybody enjoyed our inaugural episode of Pops and Drops. If you could stand another hour with us, in our next episode, we're going to talk about media sources, who's controlling the narrative, and how it's impacting, well, we'll probably get into how it's actually impacting families, because we have a personal experience where we have very different media sources and very different understandings of what is going on, and it's definitely adding a little bit of stress to our family situation.
And eventually we will talk about music.
Of course, making music. And we're going to actually let us intro a little taste right now. So enjoy this little sample of Chance the Closer. See you next week. Adios.
Chance Closer.
I can't let you go.